In a number of spiritual paths, your deeper questions might find answers in a session in the pastor's study. You're looking for something more, so let's offer you something different. Merry meet, blessed be, and welcome to another session in a very different pastor's study. No robes this time, because I'm kind of sitting on edge, waiting for a phone call. And so while I'm waiting for the phone call, I'll take care of you guys. If you've been following me on Facebook, you know what the phone call is about. And I'm a little bit anxious. But meanwhile, trying to do things that, number one, helps me to keep busy. And number two, I have this sense of duty. Make sure that these things happen. Make sure that these get out to you. If I'm worried about being on time, I'll try to do it a little early. And this week, something popped up that sure gives me an issue to talk about. And its practical application. You've heard me talk about applied theology and the practical application of theology. Bishop James W.F. Carman, one of the last real bishops, as far as I'm concerned, that the Episcopal Church ever had a habit of referring to priests as theologians and talking about how they were as theologians, and especially talking to a vestry or a bishop's committee as to who he recommends to be a new rector or victor. He would say, and this priest is an excellent theologian. Sometimes the people actually understood what he meant. A few too often thought that he was talking about a theologian being somebody who would be able to discourse for hours on end about, oh, I don't know, the width of the purple stripe on St. Paul's toga, maybe, or some other thing that... No, what he meant was to be able to take this stuff that they talk about in church and actually put it to use in your daily life. That was his definition of a good theologian. And when I talk about practical theology, I'm talking about taking the stuff that I discuss here and using it. And so we come to that lady in California who was interviewed on TV talking about how she was giving her daughter Botox injections. Her daughter is 8 years old. And in one of those juvenile beauty contests, actually several of them, of the same type that you may remember the name John Benet Ramsey. And it occurred to me, after hearing enough of this, that you remember I was talking about wells and bridges last time? This is the point. That story demonstrates a big part of the point that I'm trying to make. Wells reach deep below the surface and bring up to the surface what might not necessarily be found quite so readily on the surface. but the people on the surface need it. A bridge going across from one part of a gap to another, firmly anchored on both sides of the gap. The flexibility joint is in between. Now, why does that fit in to the story about a lady who gives her little girl Botox injections? Some things we need. Mythologies, mysteries, and passages. Mythologies, mysteries, and passages. Let's take a look at them. Best story I ever heard about the need for mythology came from Tommy Elf of From the Edge of the Circle. And I hope you don't mind, Elfster, but I gotta repeat this. This wasn't too long after a rather bad tsunami. And there was this one group of people who had basically no casualties. Other places were had gotten completely wiped out. But these people, just about all of them, survived. And the answer was simple. They knew when the water went out, that meant that the gods of the land and the gods of the sea were arguing. And they were tipping things to see where their border was going to be. And they knew when the gods were arguing, go to higher ground and wait till the gods finish their argument. While so many others were depending on scientific instruments and predictions and pictures from satellites, these people, with their mythology, some people would call them superstitions, but their mythology saved them. Mysteries. We have this tendency to want to be totally scientific and put everything under a microscope and have everything defined. I liked what Pope Benedict said about the resurrection. 2 words. Beyond science. He said it doesn't contradict science, it's beyond science. Well said. Mysteries. Things that we don't know, things that we can't quite define, and we say so. Rather than raising a bunch of arguments about it. One of the things that makes me really laugh is these people, evolution versus creationism. You know why I laugh? If you take a look, you just might reach the conclusion that I do on most religious arguments, and this being one of the supreme ones. Where's there a difference worth arguing about? And then we get to passages. And this is where that lady in California with her 8-year-old daughter and so many others fit in. And how that story led me to this. passages. What's one of the chief features of so-called less advanced civilizations, so-called more primitive civilizations? Not us with our science and technology, no. But the ones that are so-called less advanced. They have rites of passage. Once upon a time there was a TV show called America's Religious Town Hall. And they were discussing the various problems teenagers were having. And one African Methodist Episcopal bishop pointed out very wisely that these problems came at about the same time as they started separating adulthood from puberty. There was a time when you became an adult at the same time, physically and all otherwise. At 13, a boy goes into a synagogue and there's a ritual, and it ends with his saying, "Today I am a man." That's the Jewish bar mitzvah. That doesn't mean he leaves home. It doesn't mean that he gets to have his own place. But it does mean that he takes his part in the community and he steps forward and he gets some responsibilities and some privileges. And some privileges. In the Canterbury Tales, remember the wife of Bath? Her first wedding was at 12 years old. In those days, that was a common age for a girl to get married. I'm not advocating that. But I am advocating rites of passage. And maybe we need to come up with some new ones. Or some in-between passages. Because, well, if you've lived in the Midwest, especially in the rural areas, you'll also hear stories about what's called the 40-year-old boy syndrome. Son grows up on the ranch. Dad's running things. And Dad's still running things. The guy's 40 years old and his role is about the same as when he was 15, except that he doesn't go to school anymore. So when do you become an adult and take on those responsibilities? When do you not be an adult? Where can you draw the line and say between here and here, this person is a child and is expected to do childish things and to follow childish ways and is not expected to be an adult? At this point, this person is an adult. In between, what do we have and how are we going to figure that out? It's been bothering me for some time. When I turned 18, they still had the draft. There was also the fact that if I committed a crime, I'd be tried as an adult. And at 18, I had to sign up for the draft, and I could be sent off into the Army as an adult and be given some real adult responsibilities. And then, of course, that didn't mean that I could have a beer. Not then. Not at 18. I'd have to wait till 21. And in those days, I couldn't vote at 18 either. wasn't until Richard Nixon came along that people could vote at 18. So, what do we do there? And here's where wells and bridges come in. Finding out what's in those wells about passages, about mythologies and mysteries, and using the bridges to share them. And I think the investment is going to be well worth our time. I'm Iden, blessed be. Uriel's Gifts and The Secrets in Plain Sight are sponsored by the Temple of Gaia. At Temple of Gaia, we don't train you to our path. We show you how to find and pursue your own path. Above all, we tried to provide a great place to come together and to share. We're located in Collingdale, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia, and wherever cyberspace can be reached. To learn more, visit our website at templeofgaiainc.org or our meeting place in cyberspace at templeofgaia.ning.com. Thank you for coming. Feel free to return at any time. We intend to always have something for you here. Blessed be. This has been a presentation of the Wise Ones Net. Merry part and blessed be.